Good morning, mathematicians. Yesterday we learned about fractions between 0 and 1, but today we're going to go beyond 1. And as much as I would love to say I can keep this at 6 to 8 minutes, I have a feeling it's going to go a little over. So have patience with me. Go ahead and stop the video if you need to, if you think I'm talking too fast. I'll also be in class to answer any questions. Okay, so guided notes number 2 is all about fractions that are greater than 1. And when they are greater than 1, they can be written in 2 different formats. We call them improper or improper fractions. We also call them mixed numbers because they'll have a whole number and a fraction, or sometimes one or the other. Now, let's go ahead and break this up into pieces like we did yesterday, and let's go ahead and do our fraction form first. So if I have 0 and 1, yesterday we broke those into pieces. We're going to do the same thing today, but we're going to go beyond 1. To make things simple, I am going to cut everything in thirds today. Now, as I'm naming these, if I know that I have 3 pieces in one whole, remember, I'm always looking how many pieces are in one whole. I'll never look at how many pieces, when I'm looking at my denominator, are in the entire number line. I'm just looking at my number between 0 and 1. And so that means our denominator is 3 because I've taken my 1 and split it into 3 parts. And if it helps you to go and mark all the whole numbers with a different color, you can do that. That might actually help you see the difference. Now, since right here I have 0 thirds, I'm going to write 0 thirds. Now, as I move from here to here, notice at this point I have 1/3. I would name this marker, I have to go 1, 2. So now this one is 2/3. When I want to name this line, I'm going to go 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. So you will notice that when we get to 3/3, it is the same thing as 1. Now I am going to keep counting by thirds. So if I need to name this one, I'm going to count it 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4/3. I think you start to see the pattern. This is 4/3. This will be 5/3, 6/3. That's an interesting one because look at 6/3 is the same thing as 2. Let's go ahead and keep naming 7/3, 8/3, and 9/3. And look at that, 9/3 is the same thing as 3. Now we call these improper fraction because after 1, they all have a numerator that is larger than the denominator. That means it's more than 1. Now, we can also write our improper fractions as mixed numbers. If we go across, 0 is just 0. And mixed numbers, 1/3 will actually still stay 1/3. 2/3 will stay 2/3. Where it starts to change a little bit is when I get to 3/3, instead of writing 3/3, I actually just write a 1. It's a little bit simpler. Remember, I always talk about mathematicians like to be lazy when we can, so if we can get away with just writing a 1, we will. Now, 4/3, what I have to think about is I have one whole, right? I already have one whole, but I also have a third, so I actually write it as 1/3. And if I get to 5/3, notice I still have one whole, so I'm going to write the 1, but now I have 2/3. Then I get to 2. Now after 2, remember I already have my 2, but I also have a third, so it's 2 1/3. Then when I get to this hash mark, remember I'm still at 2 wholes, plus I have a 1/3 and a 2/3. Now this is the basics of what we're doing today. It'll make a little bit more sense as we start to draw some pictures. Okay, so first of all, we are going to visualize what do improper fractions look like. Improper fractions are just the number of pieces. That is it. We're just counting pieces. Now, our denominator, remember the denominator is the number of pieces, number of total pieces. Now it's the number of total pieces in one whole. So I will help you with that today. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first one. I'm actually going to section it off so we have 2 examples. Okay, our first improper fraction is 5/4. Let's go ahead and picture this. Now, first of all, I do know that I have one whole. So I'm going to draw my one whole. My denominator tells me how many pieces to cut it into. I need to cut my one whole into 4 pieces. Now my top number tells me how many I have. So I'm going to start shading. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Uh-oh. I was only able to color in 4, but I have 5. That means I need to draw another whole. I need to cut it in the same format, so I need to cut it into 4. So here I had 4/4, but I need 5/4. So that means I need to color in one more. So now I have 4/4 in this hole and 1/4 in this hole. So that is just the number of pieces. I actually count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. That is my numerator. And then how many pieces the whole is in is my denominator. Let's do one more. Let's do 7/2. Okay, so I do know that I have some holes in here, so let's go ahead and write one. Now I have a hole. What do I need to cut it into? I need to cut it into 2 pieces. Now let's go ahead and start shading. 1, 2. I only have 2 halves. How many do I need? I need 7. I need to draw another hole. I need to cut it in half because that's what my holes are cut into. And I can shade in. 1, 2. Oh, I still only have 2 halves. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. How many do I need? I need 7. I got to draw another hole. Because my holes are cut into 2, I'm going to cut it in 2 again and shade in. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Still not enough. Okay, I've got to draw one more hole. Cut it in half because that's what I'm supposed to do. And this time I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need to color in one more. Okay, I have now drawn a picture for my improper fraction. I have holes that are cut into 2. And I have the number I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you need to stop and think about this, go ahead and do that. Okay, now let's look at visualizing what a mixed number means. Again, I'm going to cut this in half so I can give you 2 examples. Now mixed numbers, mixed is telling you you're going to have whole numbers and you're going to have number of pieces. So we might have 2 parts to our solutions. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first example. The first one I have is 4 2/3. Now to draw 4 2/3, I do have to look at how many holes I have. Well, I have 4 holes. So I'm going to go ahead and draw 4 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I actually have all of those, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. But that only counts for these, right? This is this part. These are the 4 holes. But I also have 2/3. So I want you to think of this as 4 plus 2/3. So I have to draw another hole. Now, what am I going to cut my hole into? I'm going to cut it into thirds. How many am I going to color? 2. 1, 2. So this is 4 holes plus 2/3 of a hole. That's how I get my mixed number, 4 2/3. Let's do one more. I've got 2 3/5. Okay, I'm looking at the number of whole numbers. I have 2 whole numbers. 1, 2. And I'm going to color them in because I have the whole hole. Now, remember this 2 3/5 is the same as 2 3/5. That means I need to draw another hole. I don't have all of it, but I do need to draw the hole. What am I going to split my hole into? I'm going to split it into 5. This is going to be hard because this is a tiny little square. How many am I going to color in? 3. 1, 2, 3. So now I have my 2 wholes, right? That's the 2 wholes, plus my 3/5. So when I put it back together, I've got 2 3/5. Now, the biggest challenge is if we understand improper fractions and we understand mixed numbers, we can change their form back and forth. So let's go ahead and work on that a little bit. We are going to convert 2 fractions from improper to a mixed number. So 8/3 is our first improper fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing my shapes. Now I do want to turn this into a whole number and a fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a whole. Now my whole needs to be cut into how many pieces? 3. Okay, so here's my first one. Now I'm going to start coloring in so I can get to 8 pieces. 1, 2, 3. That's not enough. I only have 3/3 here. So that means I got to draw another hole. What am I cutting it into? I'm cutting it into thirds. Now I'm going to keep coloring. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now I have another 3/3, but that only gives me 6. I need 8, which means I need to draw another hole. And again, I'm only cutting into thirds. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, this time I only had to draw 2, or color in 2. So this turns into a 1, and I always color it like that just so you know it turns into a 1. I turn them into big giant ones. There's another one. So my 1 plus 1 now is a 2, and I have plus my 2/3, and as mathematicians we write that as 2 2/3. Now, of course, there are other ways to do this, but I like to draw pictures to help you. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do 5/2. First thing I'm going to do is draw a hole. And I notice that this one is cut in 2. Let's color them in. I have 1/2, 2/2. So I have 2/2. I need 5/2. So that means I draw another hole. 1, 2. Okay, so now I'm up to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I need 5. That means I need one more hole that's going to be split into 2. Okay, so now I have 1/2. Let's count how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is the right number. But let's turn all these into 1s. That's a 1. That's a 1. This one cannot be a 1. So I bring these together. I have a 2 plus 1/2, which as a mathematician I write as 2 1/2. So 5/2 is the same thing as 2 1/2. If you need a pause and think about this, go ahead. Okay, let's turn it over. Let's stop, and then you can take a break.